Bender. Hello. Hello and welcome, everybody. Carolyn Colella here with Carolyn Bender. So we are Hopewell Valley Single Parenting Together. And where's our little blurb? I'm going to read you the snapshot of what we're about. Oh, geez. You know what? I've had to start and restart this computer because I'm just a little bit of a dunce cap with all this technology in front of us. We're a group of, you know what? This is crazy. I'm not even going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I can't find it. We're a group of single parents, and we're here to support and provide resources here in the Hopewell Valley. And we actually have people outside of our group and outside of our community. So hello and welcome to everybody. And I have the distinct honor of interviewing Carolyn Bender this morning. And the reason why I say this is because 2 years ago, when I started a Facebook group, I was looking for people just to have coffee with, like-minded single parents. And I only knew really 3 single parents in the Hopewell Valley community, and 2 of them were not on Facebook. So I didn't get too far with my little coffee stuff. But when the school gave us an opportunity to meet with a counselor, because I reached out to the superintendent of schools, we had this really fine counselor named Christine Abrams in the Hopewell Valley School District who met with us. And it was incredible how many parents signed on. I didn't realize there were so many parents in the Hopewell Valley School District alone who were single and struggling during the pandemic. So Christine kind of nudged me along and said, you know, keep moving with this, summer's coming, and this is your thing, go with it. So that's where Carolyn comes in, because 1, I knew you as a single parent, and you laughed at me when I said I moved back home here to Hopewell Valley because my parents were going to help me with homework. And you were like, what, are you crazy? Your parents aren't going to help your child with homework. That's not what they do. They're grandparents. And I looked, and I remember looking at you like, no, they're going to help me. Well, they don't want to do that. They want to be grandparents. So, and you also took the special needs PTO, you became the president, and I had seen an article about in the Hopewell Express about this PTO and how they welcome ADHD students and anxiety students. And so they got on my radar, and all of a sudden there you were as the president. And for those of you who don't know, Carolyn took that special, in my mind, from my perspective, Carolyn took that special needs PTO, flipped it, shook it, and said, this is how it's going to be. And that's when Strive was created. And I would just love to hear a little bit about your job with Strive, and then we can dive into single parenting, because I knew you as a single parent and I just followed along. I couldn't make any of your meetings because it was tough, you know, babysitting and all of that. So yeah, tell us about Strive, and, you know, and why the Hopewell Valley Single Parenting Group is kind of in a small way modeling after you and what you had done.
So, you know, I've been really lucky. Like you, I was a single parent for 15 years. From the time I was, probably 21 up until the time that I was 35, I did it by myself. And there are challenges for sure. And I've had the luxury of living in Hopewell Valley for the last almost 20 years. And Strive came on my radar in kind of an odd way. When I first became aware of it, it was meeting in various coffee shops with just a handful of people. It had a lovely woman that was running it, but it wasn't a cohesive group, and it really wasn't getting the attention that it needed. And I had been able to start in Hopewell Valley, running the PTO for Hopewell Elementary, and then taking on the Hopewell PTO at the high school. And Strive was just near and dear to my heart for many reasons. But more than anything, I have a daughter that has a chronic health issue, along with ADHD and some other issues. And it's really important for us that have like interests to kind of find support in one another. So I did. I came into Strive. It was an exciting time. We hit the ground running. It wasn't really functioning as a PTO as we would understand it as parents. It was kind of, it was single missioned with initially building our accessible playgrounds, but it really wasn't doing much of anything else. And when I took over, we were just finishing up the playground mission, but that was it. So we kind of rebranded, and we rebranded it as Strive, because we as parents are striving to give our kids everything. Our kids are striving really hard to meet goals. I'm always going to feel tearful when I talk about our kids. And our staff is incredible from the top down. I desperately miss Tom Smith, who is a special ed supervisor. Rosetta is a force of her own. Paulette DiNardo is lovely.
Rosetta is our new superintendent of
our
schools.
New superintendent.
Valley.
Yep. For those of you who are kind of wonder why I got involved as well, most of the kids in the schools know my daughter as the kid who came to school with the service dog. We were the first, and as far as I know, the only family that came to the school as a service dog. And that started, bear with me, that started 4, 5, 6, almost 7 years ago now. Pandora is now retired and home, and our daughter, Kitty, that went to school with her, is in college and thriving, thanks to our district. But Strive was a big learning curve for me. We had to really build from the ground up. I had a wonderful team of parents, some that were entrenched with the group under the previous leadership, and some that were brand new and brought fresh ideas and fresh programming. But it was a gift. It really was a gift to be able to start programs like we do with our other PTOs, where we bring grant money into our classrooms, where we can impact our kids and help our staff. And we can build relationships with our families and see faces and have events and connect on a personal level with other families that are facing similar struggles, and really bring a face for our group as Strive to our district. There were meetings kind of offhandedly, but not really cohesively, that were going on. And then of course, our biggest, like any PTO, fundraising. And for those that remember, our first big fundraiser was Drag Queen Bingo. And that kind of,
I regret not
attention.
going to that. I wanted to go. I don't know. I don't remember the holdup, but I thought this is so out of the norm.
It was very out of the norm for Hopewell. It definitely got some attention from our admin here in the district, but I was grateful. We still have a very strong team at Strive. Brian Kavanaugh's currently running it. Lauren, his wife, is still the treasurer. And we have some great leadership there, and they're continuing on with the programs that we started. Just this morning, I'm reading that we have a Pieces meeting coming up. And those are parents that are getting together that have children that fall into that category. Brian and I had split it up between moms and dads because we very often see things differently. And it's nice to kind of get together independently with, our gender roles and how that generally kind of plays out. But October, we have kicked off every year with a dinner. And everybody brings a little something that they love, and we share and we sit, and there's fellowship, which is super important. None of us are in this alone. And I think that's always the scariest part, whether we have a child that has a special need of any kind, or as a single parent, the whole key to that is networking.
Yeah, and that's pretty much why I just immediately called you and asked you to be our advisor, because if there's anything we get out there is that it's okay to be a single parent, and it doesn't need to be hush hush.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Like the whole hush hush thing, like, I heard that there's a single parent meeting going at the school. Like, come on. Like, yeah, I heard. It should be like, yeah, I heard. Cool, good for you guys.
How can I join? And how can I join?
Like, what do you need? Whatever. And just for background again, Carolyn you were so amazing, because I was like, I kind of don't know, what are next steps? And you were like, logo, mission, vision. And we did it. And I hate to use the word recruit, but I wrote to a couple of the parents who were showing up, like showing every week to our Monday meetings with the school. And I just said, hey, you seem to be great at this. So next thing you know, we now have the Magnificent Six going. Right.
Right.
So we do have one father and on board, and we do have ambassadors now. We've got ambassadors to help us with the PTO and health and whatever else we need. We're building on our resources so we can supply people. So really, and that's kind of where I just want to slide into a little bit, and then we can talk about your background as a single parent, because I think it's important for people to hear. We've now been doing this for about a year and a half. I mean, we're closing in on 18 months, and I was and I still am the sandwich generation. I have aging parents, and as you know, Carolyn, because you're a former EMT, and thank you for your service and your support. And
parents are lovely.
It was a very difficult time. I was squeezed. My mother's health was difficult, and she was in and out of the hospital in a rehab, and she didn't have COVID, and we weren't allowed in. It was so hard, my dad and I.
Right.
And then he's, so the pressure, and then my son's 13, bouncing off the walls, like just destroying the house, trying to attend class. But, so it was really nice to have that 1 hour of connecting with, in the beginning, with Christine Abrams, and then starting this. So then all of a sudden we started meeting each other over the summer. So that was kind of cool to meet in person, masked up, and whatever we did, glass of wine or coffee. Eventually we walked together last winter. So we're going to continue that, obviously. And it's just been a rocky start, because as we touched upon, we have a new superintendent of schools, Dr. Rosetta Treese, here in Hopewell, and she's terrific and very supportive of us. And we are officially working with the district parent council, which was really nice to see. And they've given us our own Zoom account, by the way. So we're moving along, and this group is. And so what else did I want to mention? So I wanted to mention that, and we have a new counselor of schools too. We had such a wonderful year with Lori Rotondo that I cried when she said she was leaving, because I think I was a little too attached. But she was so dynamite with our group, married woman, 2 children in Tollgate, I believe. But she was good. And I saw it. I saw what she was doing. And I started to get suspicious that there was a competition, that her old school district wanted her back. And that started when Dr. Smith really started getting heavy hitting about how good she was in the Hopewell Valley Municipal Alliance meetings. So anyway, we now have this wonderful Dan DiStefano, and he actually went to Hopewell schools as I had. And anyhow, and then now I just mentioned Hopewell Valley Municipal Alliance.
Right.
Fabulous.
Ladies, amazing.
And thank you for that, Carolyn. You and Christine were very adamant that we joined. So that was last year's adventure, is joining the Knights of the Round Table there.
Yep.
And we'll be there again next week to just sit in and listen and see how we can be of service to the community and work together. So that's kind of the story and the buildup of the Hopewell Valley Single Parenting Together, which we voted on. Our very own April named the group. I think it's a really good name, Hopewell Valley Single Parenting Together. And then our very own Kristen Freiberg, her daughter, drew the logo. Thank you.
Barry has tremendous talent. Yep.
Yeah. So, and then, shout out to everybody else, Cynthia and Ryan. Thank you so much. So you, present day, and we started to touch on that in the our test of the Facebook Live. What a huge year you had. I mean, you had a grandbaby, Your youngest graduated the high school. Your middle child went off to New York City. And then you bought a new home. So your retirement plans were in place. I mean, major milestones all through a pandemic.
Major milestones for sure. And I think that's when your group really was so important for the pandemic and the single parents who were scrambling, immediately, how do I manage this schedule? I have work. How do I manage my kids and resource? And what you were bringing to the table became so critical to so many. I
hope so. I really, if only one parent.
It's critical. It's critical to make those connections. Everybody, I think, when they're starting off a single parenthood, are always worried. How am I going to make this work? Are there financial issues? Are there childcare issues? How do I relocate? If the homes are being split or sold, how am I going to manage emergencies and sick days, with children and things of that nature? I think all of those things are critical.
And they come up in our group.
Yeah.
Custody issues. I mean, I'm widowed. So right. These are all new, challenges that have, and I'm not a counselor. So I see this and it's okay. And that's where you guys, the stewards, it's very helpful because I reach out to all of y'all. And Carolyn, of course, you're the number one person who's like, okay, this is where you go. Boom, boom, boom. But yeah, we get some heavy hitters,
Yeah. And and you know what, there's often all of those changes are accompanied with, just a level of uncertainty, just not knowing where to turn, especially when you're losing friends. You had friends that, were friends with your husband who are no longer so much your friends, or you're relocating and those people that you used to count on are no longer in your inner circle, or because they're not, geographically close, or they've distanced through the divorce or whatever it's been. Or, some of us have been single parents by choice, had children without being married, whether that was a decision or a surprise. Every kid's, I'm always grateful.
We've got the day oneers, the new term. I hope that you don't find that insulting. I actually kind of like that when that one woman actually posted on Facebook, I'm a day one. And that, right. And I just like, well, we've got a lot of day one parents out there. Huge. That's a huge endeavor. And
yeah,
brave.
And then when it's coupled with children that have health issues, or their kids are struggling emotionally, and how do we tend to our own emotional voids, when we're trying to manage our kids, and like you, managing in our parents, and then some of our friends are managing siblings who are struggling as well. So, or work-related issues, because business and the work industry has changed dramatically. I was just reading this morning about this whole resignation. Everybody is rethinking, life as whole, post-COVID. I mean, I don't know that we're post yet, but, it's definitely changed the way people are thinking, and looking to find more happiness and more fulfillment in their everyday life, as opposed to just going to a job. So that's been interesting to watch as well.
Yeah, and we see the help wanted signs everywhere, and there's this crabbiness about the free money that's coming out, and whatever anybody's take is, I think it's exactly what you just laid out. Everybody's rethinking and stepping back, because life is short, right? Life is short, and we want to be with our children, and we want to see what's next. Now, I just took on a part-time job, and it's hard, and I can sleep at night because of it. It knocks me out, and I love it. And it is not career oriented, and I don't have to think about a thing or worry about a thing. So I was more than happy to pull into this place and say, oh, if you'll take me, I'll try the job. So it gets me out of the house. It's actually, I'm very happy with that. But isn't that interesting? So I'm kind of doing the opposite, where I'm like, I'm rethinking my whole deal too.
Listen, I'm now running my daughter's pet sitting business that she's had for the last 5 years.
How
You
much
know,
is that?
I'm in my mid 50s and I'm walking dogs and working with a team of women my age and, you know, making sure that our valley animals are getting the very best, because what we're seeing too is so many animals that are really struggling when they've had their families home for a year or 18 months. Now the house is empty. And I have to tell you, it's been great. I am finding so much joy in snuggling other people's animals and getting my steps in and getting some extra poundage that I had off. So yeah, I think, you know, it's really given us an opportunity to kind of step back and find our joy in so many ways and kind of re-examine what that means.
It isn't my poor little buddy. He's like, what are you doing now? And by the way, I just took him for a hike on Copper Hill, that Copper Hill Trail at Baldpate. That was I got a little scared out there. It's very rocky. And I don't know what horses are supposed to ride, by the way. I've got to figure out what the horse trails are.
A lot of our trails. So that's the other thing that I've done. One of my best girlfriends and I, we do a lot of hiking. And that's something that I really found pleasure in. You know, during COVID, it really did. It required you to really kind of step back. Everybody was closed. Everybody was home. You know, I was a little cagey. You know, my problem was that, you know, I cook and then that was bad. That was an extra 20 pounds I needed to get off. But one of the things that I did continue to do was get outside. And it's been really good for my mental health. It's been good for my physical health. But one of the things to pay attention to if you are hiking in this area is that, you know, based on some of the storms that we've had, there's been a lot of trees down. So there's been a lot of nature's animals that have been, you know, kind of disrupted. And a couple months ago, there was a young man who was bitten by a copperhead up on Baldpate. So heads up, they have been seen over at Goat Hill Overlook. They have been seen there. So I used to bring my dog. I don't bring my dog right now, not until it's been quiet a little bit, because I don't want my dog bitten by a snake.
Okay. And probably
heads up on
yesterday
that.
with all those rocks in the sun. Right, good to know.
Right.
Maybe
Heads up. Keep your eyes on.
I won't be out there anytime soon now. I did get a little nervous, you know, and you know, when it comes to single parenting, stuff like that, in trying to remain calm. And, you know, thankfully I had taken a picture of the map. And anyway, so, you know, you think about, all right, where's my child now? Is he off the bus yet? You know, whatever that is. So, all right. So if you don't mind, I want to back up, because
Go ahead.
And dig in about you. So how did you grow up? I grew up in a 2-parent household, so that's why I'm kind of calling out everything.
So,
single parents are, you know, people too. So tell us about your background.
Yeah, I grew up in kind of a bumpy way. My father disappeared before I ever remembered meeting him. And I was lucky enough to live in my grandparents' house out in Monmouth County in a very small town called Shrewsbury, just south of Red Bank. And I lived there for the first 8 years of my life. And then my mother remarried, and my grandparents moved from Shrewsbury down to Forked River. So that was a big change. They had been in the house since 1952, and they sold it in 74 when I was 8. And my mother remarried, and we moved into his apartment, and then we moved into another apartment. So I was in 2 different schools. I had gotten bounced around. That marriage was bumpy, really, really bumpy. They ended up separated after some domestic violence. And we ended up in another apartment. And my mother was very social. And she, after several years, met another gentleman, and husband number 2 killed himself. Husband number 3 wasn't quite husband number 3. He moved in, but they weren't husband and wife for maybe another decade.
So wait, when did husband number 2 die? Like,
so they
were separated.
So they were separated, but not divorced. And she was dating what turned into husband number 3. It was a really difficult summer. It was the summer of 1980. My grandfather, who I had grown up with, and really my grandparents were like my parents. We were always been super close. He ended up having a massive heart attack. My mother's second husband killed himself on their wedding anniversary in his own apartment. And that was also, looking back, that was also the summer that my paternal grandmother passed away suddenly, although I didn't know her at that time. I didn't know that
what you're saying is so loaded. Domestic violence, suicide,
right,
loss of a loved one.
right.
And
Lots of uncertainty.
10 years, 9, 10.
Yeah, lots of uncertainty. And I was really lucky. My grandparents were always my anchor. I spent a lot of my summer with them. My grandmother was great. My grandparents were depression era humans. My grandfather was off the boat from Poland in 1923 as a 3-year-old. My grandmother's parents immigrated from Germany and Holland. My grandmother was one of 3 sisters, and growing up in her house, my great grandmother was still alive, and my grandmother was the one that had the car and would drive. So growing up in her house, we would get in her car, we would go pick up my aunts, we would grab tea and what my great grandmother described as her medicine, which was Good and Plenty. And we would go visit her in the nursing home.
Choo Choo Charlie, Good and Plenty.
Love
Good and Plenty.
You didn't touch that. In retrospect, that was her laxative. That's because it was licorice. It was black licorice. But I grew up with my grandparents. My grandfather was this lovely human. My grandmother and my mother would go out. I mean, I was born when my mother was still 19. And my father had been a lifeguard in Seabright, and I was the result of a summer liaison. So there was lots of bumpy roads. You know, my mother was the only daughter of a Roman Catholic Polak who did not appreciate probably having a daughter who was single and expecting. So my parents were married, I'm understanding, under some duress as young people to make sure that I was born under the proper situation. But yeah, my parents were very young. I found out literally this summer by accident that my father had passed away. When I saw his house come up for sale on realtor.com, did not know that. Had to call the local police and figure out what was going on, and was informed that the last woman who referred to herself as his wife, there have been several, legal and not, DNR'd him last September, and he passed away, and I was never notified. So yeah, my parents are colorful and interesting. But I'm grateful. I'm really grateful more than anything for my grandparents who lived to be 92 and 97, who got to see all of my kids born. So grateful, and didn't see my youngest struggle with diabetes. I think that would have broken them. My grandmother was alive for that, but she was old enough where she heard it, but she didn't really understand all of the implications of it. And I'm grateful, because my grandmother was one of those that never passed a baby carriage. There was not a baby she had to see every baby she passed. I feel that way about
you're that way too. You're that way too.
I do. I love my older generation. I love my grandparents, that 80 and over. And I love little people because they say what they mean. And there is no filter or an agenda. There isn't. It's hysterical. And more than anything, working on the back of an ambulance, that's what I miss. I miss that generation, because they have lots of really interesting stories.
So, just to back up right there, that's when I saw you the next time. So I met you because we're both horse owners, and I met you on a farm, and that's when you were like, ha ha, your parents aren't going to help you. And then I saw you again because you were there when my father had slipped and fallen, and he was on his way to take my son to an event. And so James saw that. He was young, but anyhow, that's when I saw you again, and you spoke to that, and again, thank you for that. But
no, your parents are
lovely. Will you do that again? Will you do EMT?
I probably not. So that my life on the ambulance became very a little stressful, because I was volunteering for Hopewell. I was volunteering for Montgomery. I was running paid here in Hopewell Valley for a while. Station 50 is a bunch of really talented paid EMS and fire. Matt Martin, I think, just celebrated like his 23rd year running it. But I had the unfortunate opportunity to be on a call in Montgomery where we had a gentleman who's probably my age now who was stung by one bee and died. And it broke my heart. And that's a problem with EMS here in our area. You know, the closest hospital, even lights and sirens for many of us, is at least 20 minutes. And our first line of defense are our volunteers who are called out of the house. So by the time our pagers go off or you hear the siren like we did just this morning at 9:30, by the time we can stop what we're doing and we get down to the station and we have enough of a crew to get out and respond, you know, it could be 10 minutes, could be 15 minutes, and then we're still, you know, trying to get en route to whomever needs us. So there is a delay of care. That it broke my heart when we lost that gentleman. So I took that upon myself and I went to school to be a paramedic because that's how you bring in more skill. And I finished my clinicals and my didactic, and I was on the back of a truck putting in my hundreds of hours as I was getting ready to sit for my exam. And that's when my daughter was diagnosed with diabetes. And I immediately called my preceptors and from the ambulance, we were critical care transported to CHOP. And I called my preceptors and I said, listen, I'm off the radar until further notice. I have a kid who's in critical condition. Here we go.
Now you're remarried, you are married.
I have been
All your
remarried.
studying at this point was during your marriage, correct?
Yeah. So yes,
Just
I
clarify that Carolyn is married and happily married for almost, or how long?
19 years. It seems crazy. I actually came to Mercer County when I was hired as the municipal clerk for what used to be Princeton Borough. My husband was a Princeton Borough resident pretty much his whole life. He was born and raised there. His whole family is out of there. He was a police officer there for 25 years. And that's when I met him. And there's a funny story that goes along with my meeting of him. And I was introduced as his future wife. And about a year later I was, but that's a whole nother story. Yeah.
Well, what made me think of him is that he was on a call next door. We had a small fire, and there he was. And so it's like, oh yeah, this runs in the family.
It does. My future son-in-law next month is paid fire in South Brunswick. He is a lovely, lovely human. My other future son-in-law, who's been connected to the hip of my middle daughter, has rode EMS for years. He's about to be 23. My husband, myself, fire, police, EMS. My stepson is fire, police. So yeah, the majority of our family is enlisted in some kind of public service. I mean, I think we all find tremendous connection to our community because of that. I mean, and we all enjoy that. It's nice to know who your neighbors are. And listen, on somebody's worst day, it's good when you're able to make it a little bit better.
Oh, that's great. Well, now this started when you were in your 30s. So you were 21? Right.
I was married to my first husband at 19, who was 31. We had a 12-year age difference. We had a son who was terminally ill and passed away shortly after birth. My ex-husband now didn't really rally after that. I was pregnant with my now almost 33-year-old, the mother of my grandson, 7 months after my son passed. I was really ill while I was pregnant with her. I ended up in the hospital, and I came home to my then husband, who refused to get any help, old school thinking, didn't need anything, wasn't going to get it, and literally buried himself in cases of beer. And at that point, I packed up my shit and I left. So I was a kid.
And how old were you?
Let's see, I was 20.
So I was 20.
I was 20. I don't know, I got pregnant in April. This was June. I got out of the hospital. I was working for a freight company, which was great. I was making a boatload of money back then. But what I didn't know until I was in the hospital was that my employer, who had been slightly inappropriate, was greeted by my then husband, and I was let go as a result of that. I think he was terrified of my Bronx-born Italian husband, who I think probably threatened him while I was in the hospital. So I was lucky. No. I was lucky. I was ill. I moved temporarily back into my mother's house, which was not the best of all situations, but it was what it was.
So you're
I
20, you're on your second child.
yes,
You have to leave because of the
my failure
domestic.
to thrive. Right,
Yeah. You lose your job.
right,
Thankfully, you had your mom.
right.
Suitcase in hand.
Yeah,
Carolyn.
suitcase. Well, you know what? It was even funnier. I knew I was going to have to leave. I knew at that point my husband was also having an affair with our next door neighbor. So I had an apartment.
You know, that's
that
a little more common than you know.
Right.
I mean,
I had already put a
Can't believe it.
deposit down on an apartment, and I was getting ready to relocate, understanding what I was dealing with. And when I had become ill, my doctor warned me against living independently. So my mother's house was probably not the best house. It was super stressful. I still paid rent. I found another job. I ended up being a field engineering coordinator for NCR, which does like big companies, supermarkets, banks. They do all the ATMs, all of that. I did that. And then I had my daughter at 6 weeks old. They called me and asked if I would come back. And I was like, I have a baby at home. They're like, bring her in. So I brought her in to work with me.
oh, that's wonderful. So like, who was with you when you gave birth?
Her dad was. It was stressful.
Okay. Oh,
It was stressful. So he had not paid any bills after I left, and ended up we were living in Freehold when I left. I moved back to the shore, and he was living in a rooming house in Asbury Park at the time. So he was still, I didn't really understand at that point exactly what was going on. I didn't have the full picture of what was going on, but he was still going back and forth to the girlfriend who was our neighbor, who was actually a friend of mine. And
Carolyn, it's not ending. It keeps going.
well, you know what? I was really young.
I need the Wonder Woman bracelet going here. You're laughing a lot.
I was really young. My example for marriage was my grandparents, who when at the time of their passing had been together for 75 years. And I was really naive. So I had my daughter when she was 10 months old. I want to call it reconciled. My husband and I moved back in. That happened in October. And by March 22nd of the following year, I had the sheriff's department on my doorstep telling me that he hadn't paid the rent and we were being evicted. At which point, I was grateful. I had gone back to work part-time for a temp agency, so I had a little bit of money coming in. And within 10 days, I had an apartment and 2 other jobs, and I packed my shit. And by April 8th, I was gone with my daughter. And I remember moving in on a Saturday and starting my new jobs on Monday.
How long were you alone?
A long time. I dated, but it wasn't a lot. I mean, I was 21 at that point, after we had reconciled, and then I was gone, and then that was it. That was the end of that. But I thought that it could be friendly, and I was wrong. I moved out in April. I had to replace a car in August, and that was the same time that my ex-husband, after our son passed away in September, he had gotten a DUI in November and had lost his ability to drive. So he was taking his then girlfriend's car without a license to come up and see our daughter. And I didn't realize that he hadn't gotten it reinstated, but that came to my attention quickly. We were in and out of court about every 6 weeks because he wasn't paying any child support. I couldn't afford an attorney, so I was doing everything pro se and trying to find time at home and my downtime at work to get all the filings in and just trying to stay on top of things. It was a very busy time. I had a friend of mine. I worked for an engineering firm back then. Well, when I first left, I worked for a commercial real estate guy during the week, during the day, 9 to 5. I went to an engineering firm, like 6 to 11, 3 nights a week. And on the weekends, I worked in the mall, working for a tuxedo store, which is what I had done in high school. And then I would sell Avon on the side. So it was a busy time.
Oh my gosh. Well,
So
now you did share fond memories though, when you lived, I think in like a townhome community, and you had a
yes,
bunch of single parent
yeah.
friends
So
and you helped each other out.
yeah, when my oldest daughter was 5, I bought a condo through the affordable housing program, which was huge. And that gave me a stepping stone into market real estate, which was a townhouse. My middle daughter, her dad and I were together 5 years, and we were engaged for a couple of those years. And she came about a year earlier than we were thinking, or at least I was thinking. And that's when I found out about his girlfriend when I was 5 months pregnant with her. And I bought him out and kept the townhouse that we had bought together. Literally, I found out the month after we had bought it. So we bought that in November and found out about her in December. I was in an attorney's office by February. She was born in March and he was out in June. It was that fast.
So this was your second child's father.
Yeah, brilliant guy, like best public speaker I know. Just, you know, it's always sad, you know, when you see somebody that has so much potential, who is so brilliant, but can't get that personal life together. You know, as
Yeah,
I've gotten,
great way to put it. Yes.
yeah, you know, and unfortunately, you know, our daughter, as she got older, saw some of the same cracks that I saw as an adult, and has distanced herself from him as well. I'm hoping that she kind of goes back and revisits that, but I don't think that that's going to happen for a while. But yeah, no, I met my current husband when I had my 2 girls. My oldest was maybe 13. My baby at that time was 3.
So they're 10 years apart.
They're 10 years apart, almost 11 years apart. And I was really lucky. I was working a lot of hours when I took the position out in Princeton, but it doubled my income. So it was silly not to take it. I had a woman who was loosely related through extended family that worked at the child care center. I sent her to Goddard out in Freehold. And she would actually drop her at my house for my older daughter to eyeball her just in case I was running late from work, because, you know, doing a 10-minute drive home for my previous position was a lot different than doing a 45-minute drive home. And I don't know about everybody, but that traffic down 571 coming out of Princeton some nights is crazy.
Yeah.
And as a municipal clerk,
Horrible.
yeah, I was required to be there every council meeting night, every time there was a quorum of committee. And then of course, election stuff, it was a crazy time.
So your husband now, did he have children at the time when you met?
Yeah, he did. He was a single dad of a then 8-year-old. He and his wife had parted a couple years before. She had met somebody else. He was trying to work shift work as a police officer. My stepson was kind of getting bounced around from place to place to whomever was able to take him. It was a tough life. It was a tough life, clearly, for my now husband. It was a tough life for my stepson. There wasn't a whole lot of stability. And when we decided to try to merge our families, I actually moved my girls out here over a summer just to make sure that the kids, we weren't worried about us so much, but we were worried about making sure it was right for the kids. And I
guess that's what I'm driving at. Like, how did you do? I mean, obviously it seems to be a success, but blending the family, you're doing a Brady Bunch then.
It is a Brady Bunch. And it's really difficult when one of those kids is an only kid and all of a sudden he's got a bunch of sisters.
Of course, yeah.
So all of a sudden,
careful what you wish for thing. He probably wanted family and then boom.
Well, not so much, because unfortunately, his mother was firm in her belief that she was entitled to everything that he was getting prior to our arrival. And that was a little bit of a bumpy road.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean is that she didn't feel, and she was very verbal about the fact that she didn't feel as though her son should have to share any resource. And when I met my husband, there was a period of time where my stepson would only see his mom maybe an hour a week on a Sunday. And then after maybe a year and a half, that translated to an occasional overnight. And then some, as time went on, regular overnights, but that was pretty bumpy too, because it became apparent that it was difficult for her to manage an adolescent. And we would get phone calls asking us to come and pick him up because she was, having trouble negotiating an adolescent and a teenage kid, which, listen, we all have adolescents and teenage kids. That can be a really hard time. But she was really struggling through some of that. And for the longest time, we maintained a really nice relationship because, through all of this, my goal is to raise good kids. My ex-husband had 2 children by our next door neighbor. I love those kids, and my daughter is close with her siblings. My son, or my stepson, has 3 sisters now. Mike and I had Kitty, 18 years ago. Gosh, it's crazy. And
Made it work.
Yeah, it's been, I have to tell you, it's been really hard because I married into a family where my father-in-law openly said that there was no way he would accept my children, just not doing it. And that made it really bumpy.
Just old world thinking, old school thinking, or just only his biologicals.
Only that was all he was interested in. And then it became, when I was very clear about, listen, you get all or you get none, essentially. That created some issues, and essentially my husband's family stopped participating with our children, especially after our youngest was diagnosed with diabetes.
Yeah,
so that
now a crisis, what comes to rise up, right?
Yeah, I had my mother-in-law sit across the table after not seeing her for years. My husband and I went out to dinner with her to find out what we needed to do to make it more appealing. And what she said out loud to us at that dinner was that her illness was too stressful. And that was the end of that.
Oh.
So yeah, it's been interesting. Families are, and I say this about every family, families are hard. And I think in spite of that, I've been very, very lucky. My girls are incredible. I have 3 amazing daughters. I don't see my stepson as much. It's been definitely a bumpy road.
How old is he now?
He's 28. So our children are about 5 years apart, 4 or 5 years apart. My oldest will be 33 in January. My stepson just turned 28. My middle is 22. She'll be 23 in March. And then Kitty was just 18 in August.
So your oldest just had a baby, and
who
you
is
are
genetically perfect. Genetically perfect.
Of course. And what's his name? Or shall
we have Rocco now. I have a grandson named Rocco, who I am looking forward to seeing full time when my daughter goes back to work after being home for 6 months. She works compliance over at Bank of America, and they have been very generous in their time. But yes, genetically perfect. Hold on.
Oh, geez. Oh, here we go. Yay. Yes. Genetically perfect. Oh,
yes. And I have to tell you, you always wonder how it's going to translate. Being a parent is hard. Together, single, I don't care how you're doing it, it's hard. There is no book. There is no right or wrong way. It's not the same with all of your kids. It's different for every one of them. Every kid translates information differently, takes it in differently. My daughter has been an incredible mother. This baby is the happiest baby, the most attended to baby. I'm a little worried about when I get him next month and what that's going to look like, because he is used to having her full attention 24 hours a day. But
I'll be fine.
It'll be great. Listen, I've gotten my zoo passes. I'll get one for the aquarium when it's cold. I've got the pony ready to go once he can sit up and hold on to a Western saddle. It'll be great,
Well, it sounds like what's next for you is pretty lovely, actually.
It is. But you know what? there's always, no matter what age we're at, there's always an uncertainty. You know, my husband and I are in our mid-50s now, and, you know, worrying about your children never goes away, regardless of age.
Mhm.
You know, we worry about our own personal health. We worry about our health, or the health of our parents as we get older, and what that looks like for us. You know, now I have a
Yeah.
grandson whose health I worry about, you know, and, you know, I mean, honestly, you know, the most important thing to me is making sure my kids are happy. And, you know, what's nice is that I have an opportunity at least once a month to sit across the table, whether we're having breakfast or lunch or dinner. I try to get each one of them, you know, by themselves, and we just have a chat. You know, hey, I try to catch up. You know, what's going on? How's it going? Do you need help with anything? How are you feeling about things overall? Where's the path you're on right now? What does that look like for you? And all of those things. And I really have, all of these years, tried to have that one-on-one time with each one of my kids. You know, teenage years are hard. You know, can you take me somewhere? Can I have money for this?
Yeah,
But
I'm in.
yeah,
He's
um,
15.
yeah, yeah. And, you know, they want to be anywhere but with us.
Mhm.
You know, and that's a little heartbreaking too.
Yeah, when you're just 1 and 1,
Yeah.
it's
And
yeah,
now
for me, it's a new challenge.
there's that whole rejection that we feel as parents.
Oh, right here, it's stamped right on the forehead.
Oh yeah, and lots of teary moments,
Mhm.
whether they're, oh my gosh, I cry at everything. I passed on that gene to my oldest daughter. You know, I'm so proud when they reach their goals. I'm so teary when I see them hurting, or when there's disappointment. And, you know, we feel everything as parents. You know, there's no way, there's no getting around that. You just feel it. And I think sometimes as a parent, it's worse for us than it is for them, you know, because it's
Of
not only their
course.
pain.
Oh,
Yeah, it's not only their pain, but what didn't we do in order to prepare them better, you know, to avoid this? So
well,
yeah.
Carolyn, you really, again, this was an incredible conversation. You've really just, I think you've touched on everything that any single parent who may join the group here will just say, "Oh, that's me, that's me." I mean, you've covered a lot here. I want to thank you. You are the first official interview for our group, and I just hope this sets the stage for everybody to know that we're serious, and we're here for you, and we don't need to have this stigma attached. It's just, we're just doing it on our own, right?
Listen,
And as our board advisor, now that you've shifted to the board, since your children are no longer in the district, for now, we'll see what happens with Rocco, right? But parting words of advice to the parents. What do you have for us?
you know, spend that one-on-one time, even when they don't want you to. Ask those questions, even when they don't want to answer. Don't be afraid to say no. No means no. Prepare them. You know, I don't care. I mean, and my kids run the gamut. I have an academic superstar. I've got one that really struggles. And then I've got two very middle of the road kids. Sometimes it's really hard to stay engaged when they're teenagers, but find that time, schedule a dinner out to their place that they want to go to, or someplace out of the area, day trips. You know, I mean, Hopewell is a little bit of a disadvantage. There's not a lot for the kids to do. I mean, when I grew up on the beach, we would go
Yeah.
to the beach, or, you know, we had the boardwalk, and there was always something to do. Hopewell's at a little bit of a disadvantage. I mean, downtown Princeton, but then you have to have money.
Mhm.
I think the thing that I'm proudest of my kids, the one thing that really has been really helpful for me is requiring them to be accountable. Each of my kids has had to have a job at 14. Each of my kids at that point has opened up 3 bank accounts, you know, one for spending, one for a car, and one for investment. And all of their money gets split.
That's
So
good.
well, so here's my end goal. My end goal is that money accumulates, and that investment money, you know, once they have enough, you find somebody to help them invest it. And that money has proven to be a down payment on a house when my kids have graduated college.
I
You
gotta
know,
write this down.
teaching your kids accountability is huge, and that starts at home.
Mhm.
And sometimes the people that pay the biggest price for that is us, because if we ground them from something they wanted to do, that means we're home to make sure they're actually staying where they're supposed to stay. And that can be hard. Like sometimes, like I said, the punishment is worse for us. But hold your line. Hold your line. They need us to have those boundaries. They will fight them. It's totally normal. It's okay. And have those conversations.
We don't have the buffer as single parents of the other person weighing in.
No.
So we did talk about that. I guess it's time for me to mention the Nurtured Heart group too, because that was pretty key for us, at least for me as a single parent, to learn about. It is standing your ground and then trying to figure out how best to circumvent without tossing it to somebody else. So that's lobbing the problem over to dad or another. So that's been one of the single parent hiccups, at least for me.
Right.
Carolyn, you're amazing. You're an amazing mom of, I already lost count of how many children now. 4 children and a grandbaby.
Yeah.
Never on their animals, goats,
chickens, ponies, horses, hedgehogs, chickens. 4 days before my youngest went off to college, I found out that there was a hamster I didn't know about.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, I believe firmly that it's good for kids to try everything. I have one daughter that I think did every sport except basketball. But I think as a parent, the hardest thing that we do is to honor their path, whatever path that is, providing that it's safe, but to honor their path, and I see a lot of parents, especially here in Hopewell, who, like that traditional role of getting their kids into the most, rigorous colleges with the highest percentages of high income and the most competitive. And you know what, like honor their path, man. If what they want to do is something that you can't map your mind around, take a giant step back.
Yeah.
They're not going to stay in something and be happy with something that they're not engaged in, and sometimes honoring their path as they get older is really hard, really, really hard. But, mental health has come to the top of the discussion with COVID and all of this. And it's really important for our kids to be happy. And, my comment to my kids is, listen, I want you to be happy, but you also need to be independent. And you need to have a vocation that's going to pay your bills. And that doesn't mean you're living in my house. That means you're living independently. So you need to figure that out. And whatever I can do to help you get there is great. If we need to try other classes, or I need to help you find somebody to give you an internship so you can kind of get exposed, absolutely on it. We have so much resource here in the Valley. Joanne Markowitz runs a program, Hopewell, where she can match our kids with people in different vocations. Like
they're on the list. They're on the single parent list. We need to get a hold of them. That's right. Thank you for reminding me of that. Carolyn, with your permission, I would like to post this on our Facebook group and on our YouTube channel, and use this interview to launch our YouTube channel, if that's okay. And I don't want to cry because I've kind of gotten a little close, but thank you.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. You know what? It's been a lot of years since I was single, but I'm going to tell you, those years scar you in ways that you don't know. And sometimes those scars don't ever go away. They've been, more than anything, those scars have reminded me, and they should remind each one of us that's still in that place, of how resilient we are, and that we have succeeded getting through every single day so far. And that is a win. And to remind ourselves that it's okay to reach out. And when we were feeling defeated or we're having an awful day, it is absolutely the right thing to pick up a phone and ask for help. And so many of us are stuck in this place where we need to feel strong all of the time. And that is just not practical and not good mental health. We need to ask for help and not be afraid to get it.
Meditating
Yeah.
twice daily, as much as
Listen,
we can.
listen, and sometimes that's
And worse,
just,
you know.
you know what? Sometimes it's like, holy crap, like I'm exhausted. I don't have anything planned for dinner. And saying that out loud. And one of us who has made 10 pounds of something is like, here, I'm dropping off, dinner, just those little things. Or like, crap, I've got to get through that closet in my house that's been, packed of shit or belongs to my ex, and sometimes for some of us that's painful, and it's okay. It's okay for one of us to come over and help.
Yeah.
And I think more than anything, what I would love to see is this cohesiveness grow between all of us, from those that are still in it to those of us that have gone through it.
Well, if once a single parent, always a single parent. And I just have to stick to that unless you really go back together with the original parent. The dynamic is going to shift. There are new family members. There are new, it's just all new. So thank you. And,
I would say this to anybody that sees this: if there's something that I can do to help somebody work through something, answer a question, I think that it would be great if at some point our group got together and like people posted like, I need help with X, Y, and Z. And those of us that have time or have an expertise can, step in and give that help.
Push for that. That should be our next mission with the Facebook group and wherever else. All right. Well, thanks again. I'm going to hit the stop recording and I know how to do it this time. And so thanks everybody for listening. And we're going to see you around Facebook and on our YouTube channel. All right.
You're doing good things.
We're getting there. We're moving. Wow.
You're doing good things.
Bye.